Hi, welcome to the session titled Unlocking the Full Benefits of Energy Efficiency. My name is Allison Laura. I'm a project manager for advocacy at Southface, Sarasota, and I've got a co-presenter with me here today, Jason Liechty.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Liechty. I'm a senior environmental project coordinator with the Broward County Resilient Environment Department, and excited to be here. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thanks for joining me, Jason. Briefly about Southface, we are a nonprofit environmental organization with 40 years of experience in the Southeast, working to create a healthy environment for all, achieved and sustained by innovation and equity in the communities we build together.
And this is something that we pulled from our the Broward County website. I think actually this may be a little outdated. The county just refreshed its mission and vision statements, as well as sort of strategies and goals. So what I can report is that a resilient county is one of the county's 5 emphases, and our department is at the center of that. I work for our sort of department level team, which has a climate resilience unit as part of it. The department also includes a number of divisions, including natural resources, environmental permitting, building code, animal care. I'm going to forget some. Environmental consumer protection, and I'm missing one. In any event, we work across sort of the environmental landscape. And it's to make the county, a resilient, sustainable place to live with a high quality of life.
Thanks, Jason. Okay, our intention here today is to empower you to become an advocate for an affordable, equitable, and healthier future. And we're going to show you what that looks like and how to get there. So, brief overview of what you're about to see in this presentation. First, I'm going to introduce you to some of the visions and goals of energy efficiency, discuss how we get more energy efficiency in Florida, then talk about what's in our way of achieving all of the energy efficiency that's possible. Then we're going to have a case study where Jason's going to tell us what Broward County is doing for advocating for better energy efficiency, and then bring it back to that bigger picture. So I just want to kind of lay the groundwork for kind of the different tiers of interest in energy efficiency. So at the national level, the EPA has set some goals for us as a nation to achieve all cost-effective energy efficiency by 2025. And I'm going to talk about what it means to be cost-effective later and how that is potentially a roadblock in achieving all of that cost-effective energy efficiency. Why do we want to do it? Well, the EPA reports that projects that would pursue all cost-effective energy efficiency would be more than $100 billion in savings across homes, businesses, government, and industry. So this has a real financial impact on every single person who pays electricity bills. They broke it down into a few more goals. The first one being establishing cost-effective energy efficiency as a high priority resource. Also developing a process to align utility incentives such that efficiency and supply resources are on a level playing field. And another one is about developing state policies to ensure robust energy efficiency practices are in place. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this, from the concept to the practical. I also want to draw your attention to a poll question that you can now answer in the HOVA platform. What do you think of when you hear the word energy efficiency? You can just free type any response and we'll share the results of what people think of when they hear energy efficiency. So first, answering the question, what does it mean to be least cost? The driving concept between the national goals is that energy efficiency is the low-hanging fruit of the electricity grid, meaning it's going to be the easiest to attain. because it costs less when compared to supply side investments like building a new natural gas plant. Efficiency programs can be 1/3 to 1/4 of the cost of building a whole new plant. So it makes a lot of sense. Let's go after this least cost resource rather than investing in the most. So even though efficiency is not supplying electricity to the grid, it offsets the growth of demand that could trigger retirement of a fossil fuel plant or prevent even building a new one in the first place. So we also have some state level interest. So the Florida statute has some actual language saying that we want to discourage all forms of energy waste and we want to promote energy conservation. And the office leading up these efforts is the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, currently led by Nikki Fried. They published a Florida Energy and Climate Plan, and in this plan, they have a goal to identify and reduce energy waste in state-owned and leased facilities. So that's because that's what they can control, but we know that there are many other people who control their own electricity bills, and we're going to tell you about ways that they can also reduce their energy waste. Who else is interested in efficiency? Well, utilities are interested because they have set net zero carbon goals. And to achieve these net zero carbon goals, we need to take advantage of that low-hanging fruit of energy efficiency, because that's going to be the most affordable way to achieve clean energy. Coming down in scale again. Oh, I feel like I missed one. Sorry. Who else is concerned? Communities. So most communities are interested in energy efficiency. We have at least 12 Florida cities with 100% clean energy plans. And the logic here is if you want to run on 100% renewables, you must first eliminate all the waste to enable more retirement of fossil fuel plants and make it cost effective to supply the least amount of clean energy. It has to be a mindfully paced transition, because if we replace all the fossil fuel plants with renewables in 1 year, your bills would skyrocket even more. But for some of us, energy efficiency is more than a want, it's a need. If you find yourself living in an old house on a limited income, it makes it prohibitive to pay the upfront cost of efficiency. But does that mean they should have to pay up to 20% of their income on energy bills when the average household pays only 3 to 4%? That's called energy burden. And there's other great organizations in this conference that can talk more about that. We're going to focus on how to achieve more energy efficiency. But what I'm trying to illuminate here is that this is a real urgent priority for some of the most vulnerable households. So to recap our intention here, energy efficiency is affordable as the least cost energy resource. It's the low-hanging fruit of lowering grid demand to make it easier to supply with clean energy, and it lowers monthly bills to fight inflation. Energy efficiency is also an equitable strategy of the clean energy transition because it lifts up the most energy burdened households to be able to lower their energy bills without large upfront investments in rooftop solar or battery storage. Finally, energy efficiency helps all Floridians by retiring or avoiding fossil fuel plants that emit carbon dioxide, which has proven negative health impacts on the air quality regardless of who uses it. So less dirty energy means cleaner air. Okay, so the next section is about how we get there, right? Efficiency sounds like a great thing, and if we had all the money in the world, we would just buy all the most modern appliances. Let's look a little bit more about what that is. So energy efficiency and customer generated renewable energy are known as demand side management strategies, commonly referred to as DSM. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case you ever see it come up in the news or as you're advocating, that you understand what that means. So the demand side is the same as the customer side, and demand side management programs reduce the overall demand to the grid. Efficiency can occur at many places in a home or business. It happens often at the plug load, such as with Energy Star appliances or LED light bulbs, and also at the system level by right sizing your HVAC system, maybe even having a solar hot water system. There are a lot of barriers though. One of the biggest is the upfront cost to replacing functioning parts that may not have outlived their service life. Also, savings maybe not paying back fast enough. And the fundamental paradigm of this all is that utilities have little motivation to sell you less energy because they profit the most when building new supply sources. So the question always comes down to who's going to pay for it. Well, the first option is you, out of your own pocket. There are programs where there's limited state and federal grants. So the Florida Office of Energy does offer some grants to local governments and small businesses. They've got a big lighting program. And another big share comes from utility-sponsored programs. So all utilities in the state are mandated to offer free home energy audits. If you haven't taken advantage of that yet, contact your electricity provider and find out what they offer and get involved in that. During the pandemic, they were even doing them remotely. Utilities also offer rebates for appliances and weatherization. That's the really biggest part where they contribute. So the rest of this presentation is going to be focused on utility-sponsored DSM programs. You can see on this image some of the examples that different utilities provide. The focus is on utilities because utilities are the best suited to lead energy efficiency as they already have direct relationships with every electricity consumer. You're paying your bill every month, you talk to them, they know how much energy you're using. They have the best resources to make bulk purchasing of some of these upgraded, more efficient appliances. They're well positioned to bear longer payback times. So that's the amount of time that your savings will equal the investment. And they also have the ability to introduce new technologies for better customer information and transparency. Some of these things would be like demand response programs for energy conservation at peak demand, time of use tariffs where rates change relative to peak demand, as well as investing in research and development in emerging technologies. So they have the opportunity to really be a leader in this space. And Jason and I are going to give you more information on whether they're really living up to that or not. So how do utility DSM programs get to customers? Each state is going to work differently, and I'm going to introduce kind of how it works here in Florida. So there are 7 Florida utilities. These are the biggest ones, things like FP&L, Duke, TECO, and they are regulated by this acronym called FECA, the Florida Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. This is written into the Florida statute, and it states that it's critical to utilize the most efficient and cost-effective demand-side renewable energy systems and conservation systems. So it's literally a legal basis to say that we need cost-effective energy. It further states that the Public Service Commission is the authority to set energy efficiency goals. Now, this process is a bit complex. I'm trying to break it down into a simple process so you can understand where you can get involved and where to get information about this. It's complex because the rules are confusing. Utilities tend to play games, and that's why we, concerned citizens and local governments, need to advocate for our own best interest. So first, it starts with the utilities paying a consultant to perform a technical potential study. This is like a 300-page document that analyzes all the potential energy efficiency programs and applies cost effectiveness test to measure the costs and benefits to identify which programs are cost effective, which is defined to have more benefits than cost. And so in shorthand, that's just to say, is this going to be beneficial to the most amount of people? From there, utilities file a 10-year site plan, which projects how much demand there will be and what the supply sources are. The third step, the utilities then propose numerical goals for energy efficiency as a percentage of their sales or revenue. Now, this only happens every 5 years, so it's actually a pretty limited engagement, and that's why a lot of organizations like Southface and Broward County stay current with the proceedings and intervene so that we can make sure that we're establishing the best 5-year goals. Now, the utilities propose those goals, and then the Public Service Commission, which you're going to hear about in a second, approves or rejects those goals. Finally, the utilities submit an annual DSM program design and prior year performance. That's where they come up with all those plans you saw in that big grid. So if you've never heard of the Public Service Commission, don't worry. They are a bit of a mysterious organization because we don't vote for them as other states do. They are appointed by the governor and then approved by other committees. So these appointed officials regulate all the utility companies, and they serve 4-year terms. Currently, 4 out of the 5 are appointed by Governor DeSantis. Each of the 4 steps I just covered are entered into the public record and available for any interested party to read and comment. So all of this is attempting to be very transparent and open a democratic process, but we're going to tell you more about how that actually works out. So as well as other utility-related requests, we've got the energy efficiency goals. They also need to propose plans for rate increases, new generation facilities, or cost recovery for fuel. So any of these kind of big money-changing ideas has to go through the commission and get approved. So there is a little bit of a checks and balance introduced into this process. And this is graph is showing a little bit about this. So they'll hold a service hearing, and this is where the utility will come in and propose often ridiculously low energy efficiency goals in their written plans. So then the Public Service Commission will host a workshop or service hearing so that the commissioners and their staff can hear from the public. This is where you and I, interested parties, nonprofits, governments, regular citizens, can comment, ask questions, and advocate for more meaningful efficiency goals to achieve some of those goals I stated in the beginning. There is also this Office of Public Counsel within the state legislature who represents customers in these hearings. So you do have some legal support that is advocating for your side. But again, the commissioners get the final vote, final ruling, and they basically approve or reject the utilities' proposed goals. And they do have actually a good precedent of rejecting goals that are too low. Recently, some of the utilities tried to propose goals of 0, which a lot of people pushed back and said 0 is not even a goal. And so the Public Service listened, they said that's ridiculous, and they made them adopt goals that had been previously agreed upon as reasonable. So how can you get involved in this process? Here's an image of what the chamber looks like. It's a pretty formal proceeding, but there's a range of options with varying level of effort or commitment. You can make a public comment in person or in writing. You can meet with commissioners. Remember, they work for you as a public servant. You can write letters. You can even protest in the street. There's actually groups that do that. Overall, there's also a formal definition called intervening in the docket, and you can become a formal party that requires a stakeholder to file a petition to leave to intervene. And from there, the subsequent level of effort can range on a scale of low to medium to high. So we'll just look at what some of those options look like here. On the low end of the scale, if you want to put in minimal effort, you can just track the filings and maybe listen into the hearings. At a medium level, maybe you want to get more activity behind there. You can actively read statements, you can file comments. I think another great way would be to join an organization who participates at that high level, and oftentimes they will feed you resources in the form of like a letter template, so then you can address all of the commissioners individually. And that's when democracy works, when their inboxes get flooded with all of these public requests. So that's a great way to align your actions with your beliefs. So now the bad news. We have some roadblocks here. What's in the way of preventing all the cost-effective energy efficiency? I've got two graphs to show you here. And what they're demonstrating overall is a lack of utility leadership. So Florida has historically proposed low goals that leads to very little energy efficiency at all. And we have weak spending as a percentage of revenue. So you can see on this graph that the Florida average is below 1%. In the Southeast, they have 3 times as much as that. And the national average is almost twice as much as that. So of course, we're not as progressive as California, but we're also not even as progressive as Georgia or South Carolina. So we've got some room to grow. On the left side of those graphs are the individual utilities themselves. They all have different levels of goals. And at the bottom there is, well, that's FPU. Okay, not FPU. The next one, efficiency savings as a percentage of annual retail sales. So this really shows kind of inequities in distribution. There's a very low savings as a percentage, and it's completely missing some of the most vulnerable low to moderate income customers. That spike we see around 2017 is actually due to a huge investment in an industrial facility efficiency, which is a way that they can hide behind gains in other areas and continue to ignore kind of the everyday household. So these are the dials we're trying to move through effective advocacy, have higher goals and more savings. So the crux of the argument is wedged in a loose interpretation of the rules. So the Florida statute sets up where they want to go, and then they have these legal rules that they have to follow to get there. Now, remember, one of the big goals is to achieve cost-effective efficiency. So this is where we start to get lost in the weeds. Despite evidence that DSM programs being the most cost-effective source of clean energy, they're consistently underutilized at scale because utilities argue that they are not cost-effective. But there's lots of disagreement about what is cost-effective and how to include equity in programs, and even how programs should be evaluated for effectiveness. So here's just a quick example of kind of how we're doing it now and why things are slipping through the cracks. So the top table shows what primary cost effectiveness test is used in different states. And you'll notice that Florida is an outlier, the only one that uses this RIM test. So that's the ratepayer impact measure. And so that really just determines what's going to happen to ratepayers as a whole. But this test has a lot of failings because what it primarily measures, if you look below it in this example of the benefits, the cost is the bill savings, which utilities view as lost revenue. So in our advocacy circles, this is often referred to as the no winners test, because very few programs can pass this test because of the way they manipulate the costs and benefits. It looks like it's not cost effective, but what it's saying is that the utility is losing out on sales. And this image is a little cut off, but it was showing that it had a cost benefit ratio of below 1, which says that it's not cost effective. So goal setting is such an essential component that requires advocacy and participation in the regulatory process to truly unlock the full benefits of energy efficiency. Now, where we are today, changes to the goal setting process are being discussed right now in the Public Service Commission in 2022. It's part of a 2-year process that's been attempting to clarify what cost effectiveness means and what tools should be used to measure cost effectiveness. Now, what's working is we've got a large coalition of interested parties who are actively writing to the Public Service Commission, showing up for their workshops, and having outreach and education at every level, just like we're doing today, to really push for more energy efficiency to achieve all of those goals: affordable, equitable, healthier energy. These are just a small handful of the organizations participating, including mine and Jason's, and good ones to kind of look out to, get on their mailing list, sign up to volunteer with letter writing. That's going to be the best way for you to participate in getting more clean energy and energy efficiency. So we've got our second and last poll question here. Have you ever submitted a public comment to the PSC? Would love to know if people listening to this today or in the future have participated in this public comment process. If you have, pat yourself on the back. You're being a great participant in democracy. If you're not, hopefully you'll consider it after today. And another reminder, you can chat some questions to us through the platform at any time. We'll try our best to answer them live or after this session airs. So from here, and this, what you're seeing in the background is actually a screenshot of the website from the PSC. This is specific to the FECA rulemaking docket currently, and there's separate links. This is public knowledge. These are individual letters that people have submitted advocating for better goal setting in energy efficiency. There are over 2,000 individual entries into this docket from organizations and individuals and even elected officials alike who are telling the PSC that we need more energy efficiency and that they can have better leadership to set stronger goals through the utilities and basically to do their job to regulate these utilities. Okay, so now let's get even more specific. I'm going to turn it over to Jason, and he's going to tell us about what he and Broward County have been doing to advocate in this area.
Thanks, Allison. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about Broward's advocacy. I do want to mention, though, that we're, in addition to kind of telling others what to do, telling the PSC what to do, we are walking the walk as well. And we have energy service contracts in place for many of our facilities to reduce energy consumption, including we have a large cogeneration project at our North County water and wastewater services plant that takes the methane generated from the digestion process for sewage and actually burns it and uses it on site rather than letting this off gas into the atmosphere. We put quite a few solar projects on our facilities to further lower what we need to purchase from the utility. And then we did actually sign up for 100% of our remaining electricity through FPL Solar Together program. So without even kind of actually declaring 100% clean energy goal, we've achieved that, at least for county operations. Community-wide is a different story, but I just wanted to note that. So why does Broward engage in this process with the PSC on some of these issues? We're the voice, public interest voice for the 2 million residents of the county and thousands of businesses and nonprofits that do business here in the county. We also have institutional interests, kind of selfish interests. We've got 6,000 employees. I think my budget number is actually wrong. I think we're a $6 billion budget. Large electricity bills. Our electricity bill is over $10 million a year, or has been in recent years anyway. And we're threatened by climate impacts that are caused in small part by fossil fuel electricity generation. So reducing how much of that is going on, comes back to benefit us. Next slide, please. So kind of, where does this interest in commenting come from? In addition to kind of, being this voice for ourselves and our residents and businesses. It's consistent with a lot of the work that we've been doing over the past almost 15 years. We've had a climate change task force in effect for close to 15 years, I believe. We've done 3 iterations of a climate action plan for the county. We were a founding member and are continuing participants, and a core member of the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Change Compact, which is a 4-county alliance of Palm Beach, Broward, Miami-Dade, and Monroe counties, along with many, many stakeholders, including municipalities, South Florida Water Management District, the Nature Conservancy, and many other participants and stakeholders to cut greenhouse gas pollution in the region and adapt to the climate impacts that are going to be inevitable. Part of that is the development of regional action plans, climate action plans. We're currently in the middle of creating our 3rd iteration of that, which will be released before the end of the year. Broward and the compact were named as Department of Energy Climate Action Champions back in 2014, I think it was. And we've received some technical assistance from the federal government as part of that recognition. Broward County joined the Under 2 Coalition, which is an international alliance of subnational governments that voted to climate action. We've engaged in America is All In, which is a similar coalition here in the United States of pretty much everybody: local governments, state governments, businesses, religious institutions, educational institutions. All originally it was devoted to achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement, even though the Trump administration had withdrawn the United States from that. We joined the Race to Zero, which is a commitment kind of globally to reduce carbon emissions to zero by the year 2050. And like I said, we've done really well on the energy side for our operations so far, but obviously getting the community to that point and doing our share, the state and the national governments have to do a lot as well, but we want to do our fair share of that also. So next slide, please. And just a little about how we operationalize, I guess you'd say, our policy and advocacy work. We have county legislative programs that set out the positions and the interests that the county has, particularly the core beliefs, as well as any specific comments around certain legislation. The compact puts together joint legislative programs every year. The 4 counties agree on principles and priorities, both at the state and federal level, and then work to incorporate them into their own county level legislative programs. And sort of the advocacy we do takes the form of written communications, letters, official comments, et cetera, oral comments, which I'll tell you a little bit about, we've made in the past. We have an Office of Intergovernmental Affairs here at the county that acts as our in-house lobbyist and is in Tallahassee during session, goes to DC often to represent the county. And then the county also hires lobbying firms to help kind of amplify its voice in Tallahassee and at the federal level. Next slide. So how have we engaged with the PSC over the past, well, I guess more than a decade? I've been with the county nearly a decade, so most of the items on this list I things that I helped to move forward. But it goes back all the way to 2009, as you can see here, a good handful of times that we've engaged around the FECA process. We've also had, advocated for energy efficiency through the rate cases when FPL comes forward proposing rates for the next period of time, making the case that frankly they're not doing the best job that they could around energy efficiency and the effect of rate increases on low-income households, and the fact that there are so few programs to help those families reduce their energy consumption, and to challenge them to do better and to ask the PSC to basically make them do better. So I'll go through these fairly quickly, but I'll go through these in a little more depth. So if you go to the next slide, please. So back in 2009, our climate change task force, which at the time was led by County Commissioner Kristen Jacobs, later a state representative who unfortunately passed away a few years ago, agreed on a letter to asking the PSC to set a meaningful goal for utilities, and with the impact, whatever that goal would need to be to achieve GHG reductions of 7% below 1990 levels by 2012. And that's a target that came from the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement, to which the county had signed on. I can safely say that the PSC did not require that of utilities. Again, in 2014, 5 years later, the FECA process is a 5-year process. Our mayor, urged on by our climate change task force again, but our mayor at the time authored a letter strongly encouraging the PSC to set meaningful goals for energy efficiency by utilities. And I believe in that year, the goals were cut by something like 90% from the previous goals. You can go to the next slide, please. So even from that low basis, right, the goals were pretty minimal at that point from 2014 to, based off of that 2014 rulemaking, or excuse me, that 2014 proceeding. When it came time again for FECA in 2019, this time our county commission adopted a resolution, and that's like a form of policy advocacy when our commission establishes a policy through a resolution. So this time we again said we wanted to see meaningful goals, but we got much more specific. We said, please set this numeric conservation goal at 0.33% of the previous year's sales in kilowatt hours. And this was based on an average rate for utilities in the Southeast United States, excluding Florida. And it is not that much. As you saw from one of Allison's slides, the national averages are often, 1%. Some states do better, 2% annually. So this is still pretty darn minimal, but just, what the region is getting on average. So low ball goal. We wanted to see specific requirements for investment programs to assess low and moderate income households. Really, this is where the programs and these savings should come from, would be these households who can clearly benefit. Not just the kind of the energy benefit is really system wide, or benefit to the climate, but reducing consumption and making households more efficient. It helps their bottom line, and struggling families need all the help they can get. And so to be energy burdened and spending way more than they need to be on energy, this is a place where there could be a real way to kill two birds with one stone, if you will. And finally, we wanted to see a requirement that utilities share consumption data at a real granular level, census block level, with local governments, because we have trouble planning and creating programs to augment anything that a utility might have, or in Florida's case, in the absence of some meaningful utility programs, it's really hard for us to plan when we don't know which neighborhoods have the housing or the infrastructure that is making it hard for folks to save, reduce their consumption, and where we might target our efforts. Something the utilities have not been particularly forthcoming with, at least the investor-owned utilities and FPL in particular. So I don't want to take credit. Broward alone cannot take credit, of course, for what transpired in 2019. But the utilities were going to basically, as Allison said, drop to zero. And the PSC said, no, you're going to have to stick with the previous, basically the previous level. So basically the 2014 level. And that was a huge victory, despite the fact that it, in numeric terms, is still pretty minimal. The fact that the utilities did not get what they wanted, counts in Florida as a huge victory. So needless to say, we did not get nearly the things that you see here on the slide, but nor did the utilities get what they wanted. So again, we'll take our small victories. So next slide, please. So as Allison noted, in 2020, the PSC initiated this process to look at the rulemaking, to look at the rules around FECA, sort of the tests that are performed, the process of goal setting, and so forth. And since we have engaged in the proceedings themselves, we put together some communications, again, advocating for certain things, meaningful goals, better tests, etc. The compact put a letter together for part of this rulemaking, requesting a second workshop, because at the time they were only considering doing one workshop. They've since had several more, but also to really expand the scope of the rulemaking to look at this comprehensively. There was a very narrow focus, and we wanted to see them expand it. And so there was, something of an expansion of the scope, although I still don't think it's quite as wide-ranging as we would have liked to have seen. Next slide, please. In addition, the county had its own comments that we put together that a former colleague of mine delivered as an oral comment. I mentioned oral comments before. And some of the things we pointed out is that energy efficiency is one of the PSC's own goals. That we are, we want to be champions of our utilities. We want them to have the very best programs in the US. And we have no objection to utilities having financial incentives to do so. Many other states have set up their utility regulatory systems to incentivize their utilities to provide energy conservation and reduce energy use. There's no reason Florida could not also have a system like that. We wanted to see programs that really help vulnerable constituents with their bills. Like I said before, really target where we get those energy conservation savings from at low and moderate income households. And frankly, the PSC and utilities should increase their ambition because we've been aiming real low, and it's time for a change. Next slide, please. And in order to continue that, that comment was on early in the year, January. Our commission did actually adopt another resolution about the rulemaking, urging the PSC to expand the scope. So again, this is the highest level of county kind of decision making and policy setting, to provide use of national best practices. Allison mentioned how Florida is an outlier in using the rate impact management measurement test, And so we specifically urged the PSC to replace that RIM test, and there's also a 2-year payback screen. One thing to note about the RIM test is that it is not applied to like the FPL's rate case, for example. They're not judged on the effect on rates using this same test, which, if you're raising rates, guess what? Your rate impact there's gonna be one. And for things like the early cost recovery for nuclear power plants that may never get built, they've done some speculation in the natural gas market a few years ago. These things are not subject to the same test, so it's sort of heads they win, tails they win. It's not particularly applied in a consistent way that seems fair. And the 2-year payback screen, I don't think we've talked about this yet, basically eliminates any energy conservation measures where it would be the savings would basically pay for the improvement in the first 2 years. And the problem with this is that's great for folks who have money to, say, buy a new air conditioner that's going to save them enough to cover the cost of the air conditioner in those first 2 years. But what about low-income people? They don't have, tremendous resources, and they can't afford to make those investments, even if they're going to save money over 2 years. The upfront money just doesn't exist. And by placing this screen on potential measures, it really eliminates some very beneficial, potentially beneficial programs and improvements. And we think that's very and very antiquated outlook on things. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that we have intervened in some of the rate cases as well. The 2016, we delivered an oral comment, noting that there were some pluses to the FPL's performance, low rates by national standards, investments in infrastructure, replacing the coal plant here in Broward at Port Everglades, but that, some of their behavior, frankly, was not positive. They, continued to push for elimination of conservation programs. They had been involved in derailing a sort of grassroots solar constitutional amendment and putting up their own amendment to confuse matters. There was some issues around the Turkey Point cooling canal cleanup. They wanted to bill customers for that. I mentioned their early cost recovery for nuclear plants. Customers picked that expense up. Speculation for fracking projects, and just the continued natural gas dependence. An issue which is got a lot of salience right now with great increase in natural gas prices. Being so dependent in Florida and FPL in particular on that resource really exposes customers to big increases in their bills to cover those higher energy costs. Next slide, please. And again, in 2021, we wrote a letter to the PSC about FPL's proposed rate plan for the next few years. And this time we really focused our energy on the impact it would have on low and moderate income households. An 18% rate hike over the period is pretty significant. Again, there's virtually no conservation programs to cushion the blow because FPL is advocating constantly for very minimal goals and using these outdated methods, continuing to use these outdated methods. Other utilities can report reaching a pretty substantial segment of their low-income households, 19 to 29% from other utilities in Illinois, in Florida. And talking about investor-owned utilities here versus 1% for FPL. 1% of households are reached through FPL programs. And finally, we pointed out that the utilities get a guaranteed return on equity, which basically incentivizes them to invest in expensive infrastructure because that's where they're going to make, somewhere around 10, 11, potentially 12%. And we pointed out that that was pretty excessive. At the time, inflation was very low. Returns on other types of investments were much lower than 10, 11%. And they also proposed the use of this kind of financial mechanism a little bit, being able to kind of double count some things that allows them to really maximize their profit. And we thought that was really, unnecessary given that we're already asking for more in terms of the return on equity. So, and then finally, we also engage on some national issues. The PSC had asked for comments on the Clean Power Plan proposed by the EPA back in 2014. And sort of really the most important piece for this presentation is that we talked about energy efficiency needing to be the top strategy, that as the cheapest source of energy and the one that really can deliver benefits to low and moderate income households as well. That should be the centerpiece of any any energy programs in the state, and that continues to be true. And hopefully you've seen that from when I went over the other examples of our advocacy. So that's it. I'm glad to answer any questions in the remaining time that we've got.
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate how Broward County has been a leader in this space, and that you're not only providing those essential services to your local community, but you're advocating at the highest levels to ensure that these policies trickle down and make energy affordable and resilient for Floridians all over. It's really excellent. Well, this pretty much wraps it all up. I just wanted to reiterate some of our intentions and takeaways from today's presentation. So You and I and everyone can advocate for more energy efficiency because it creates healthier air by enabling retirement or avoiding new fossil fuel plants. It builds an equitable strategy to transition to the clean energy grid and makes electricity more affordable for all Floridians. So that wraps it up. Jason, you got any other final takeaways?
No, just really appreciate the opportunity to present and part of this great Florida Climate Week.
Wonderful. Yeah. And if you want to ask some more technical questions, I kept it a little high level because I wanted to make sure that we approach the fundamentals. But if you're ready to jump in and advocate and you want some more guidance and support, please feel free to reach out to me. All my contact information is found through this platform. You can connect with both Jason and I. And again, we welcome any more Q&A. We'll do our best to answer it all in a timely manner. And hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Allison, just one quick thing. I should probably put in a plug for the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Leadership Summit that Broward is hosting this December 8th and 9th. You can go to the Broward County website, broward.org/climate, and you'll find a link there to the summit. It's a great program and covering lots of issues, relatively affordable as in-person conferences go. And so anyone who's interested in that, please check it out for more information.